out to Kevin last week and said, sure, I'll come on into the studio this morning. And that's Kevin Coughlin. You remember Kevin, late 90s to the early 2000s, House of Representatives, became a state senator up until 2011, and then stepped out of the political arena. And now he's looking to get back in, running in the primary coming up in a couple of months. So, Kevin, first of all, good to see you again, my friend.
Good to see you, Ray. Happy New Year.
Kevin was one of my very first luncheons I had. You and I were just talking about this a couple of weeks ago. He was one of my very first sit-down lunches in the city of Akron. Ed Esposito was bringing me around. My first one was with Mayor Plusquellic and Mark Williamson, and you were number 2. We sat down and he introduced me to you, and we had lunch together.
Those are 2 very different lunches.
Very different subject matter for sure. Okay, so as I mentioned, 2011, you step away from the political arena, but now you're looking to get back in. Talk about, first of all, the decision going back to 11, because at that time, you were on a pretty good high road, and there was a lot of talk about you statewide for making a big run and governor and beyond that. And then all of a sudden, you kind of step aside. I know you took care of the family. Love seeing the pictures the last decade, by the way. But talk about that decision back 12 years ago.
Yeah, in fact, last time I was in your studio, I had my youngest daughter with me, if you remember that. But
yeah.
She's a freshman at the University of Washington, so we were up very late last night watching the Huskies.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so I left the Senate by term limits at the end of 2010 and started a marketing business. I've been running that business for the last 13 years and helping to raise our daughters. I've been very frustrated at the lack of responsible political leadership, particularly in Washington, D.C. And I define that as people who are dedicated to the principles of democracy, to making government work for the people that they represent, to being focused on the issues that people really care about, and actually doing something to solve those problems. And it seems like we've got a lot of people in Congress who want to be famous, but don't want to do the job. And we've got a lot of people in Congress that go there and don't think and just push the button yes or no depending on how they're told. And that's a problem, because we've got some serious issues in this country that need to be solved: long-term debt, spending. But really, the overall issue is taking back control of the federal government for the people. I've watched Congress give away its power for my entire lifetime. Congress hardly even makes laws anymore. Most of the things that we would consider to be laws in this country are actually passed by the executive agencies, in the dark by bureaucrats. And that has got to be clawed back. There's got to be a lot more oversight over the rulemaking process. It's not sexy political stuff, but it's at the heart of what's wrong in our government today. And we have to have more accountability in our government.
Kevin is running, by the way, I don't know if I clarified this, in the primary, Ohio's 13th district.
Correct.
So, Kevin, let me ask you this. 13 years away from it, did it help you see this a little clearer? I'm not saying you didn't see it clear when you were in office, but taking a step back, maybe you see things maybe differently is the better word.
Very much so. You know, I think the last 13 years running a business have been more formative than the 14 years I spent in the legislature. I just have a wider view of the world and the challenges that our small business people face, regulations and taxation, and trying to move ahead in the face of government sometimes that's in your way. Obviously life experiences. I like to think that I'm a person who gets better every year, and what would we be if we didn't progress? And so, I look at the world differently than I did before. But the other thing that's happened is, in the last, I don't know if you've noticed, Ray, but in the last 13 years, politics in this country has changed a little bit. When you go home and your dog looks kind of guilty because maybe they chewed something up or they did something in the house, I feel like, I'm coming back into the game. I'm like, what did you do? What did you do to our country? Did you eat the border? What's going on?
Yeah. There's a lot of frustration. I think you touched on it in the political arena, where it seems like agendas have taken part. No matter what side you're on, right? D or R, no matter what side you're on, there's agendas that are more important than serving the people and the people's needs from state to state, county to county and such.
That's right. And the issues are obviously different than they were. I've had my head wrapped around state issues for so long. But one of the reasons, the Republican Party asked me to run for this, that our leaders here in Summit County asked me to run for Congress. And it met at the same time, that request met at the same time that I've had this focus on federal issues and saying, okay, for the rest of my life, if I'm involved in public service, what issues do I want to be involved in and what do I want to try to impact? And I think the big issues of our society and our place in the world are really important. And at the heart of it, Ray, is this concern that every generation seems to have a challenge that they have to stand up for. And right now it seems like it's the defense of the very idea of America itself. Overseas, it's being directly challenged by China and the troublemakers of the world who are saying, look, we believe that top-down management and control of the economy and the markets and authoritarian rule is the way to create prosperity and stability. And we're going to put that out there to the world in direct challenge to the 1776, 1789 idea of liberal markets, open markets, individual over the state. And I still believe that America is the world's greatest idea. And so we've got to be engaged in the world, but it's hard to do when here at home there are so many people that are adopting that point of view. And so we're fighting that both overseas and here at home. And we've got to have the right leadership there to push back on these policies of the left, frankly, and what I would call Marxist policies that we see attacking the institutions of our country whenever something doesn't go their way. They want to tear things down. You know, they don't win the presidential election and they want to get rid of the Electoral College. They can't get things done in the Senate and they want to make Puerto Rico and D.C. a state. They don't like who's winning in the polls, so they try to keep you off the ballot. And on and on and on. We're not the ones doing that, okay? There is a group of people in this country who are constantly looking to tear down the pillars of our democracy in this country to get their way, or because they're not getting their way, and that is a danger to our country.
Kevin Coughlin with us live in the studio here on WAKR. He's running in the primary, Ohio's 13th district. Kevin, let me ask you this, because as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I've enjoyed your travels and your hiking and your biking with the family and following you as I do. But this is a family decision to turn around and get back into this. And knowing you and knowing really anybody in the field of politics, it's not just a 9-to-5 thing. It's a lot of commitment. This was obviously a family decision.
It was, and of course, you know, we're a very strong-knit family, and so this is very much a team effort. But we also, Ann and I are sort of empty nesters right now. We've got one that just graduated from Indiana University, and we've got one away on the West Coast at college. So it's a good time for us to rededicate ourselves to public service in some way. And I told our party chairman several years ago that didn't have to be elected office, but you know, and frankly, about 6 months ago, 4 months ago, this was not on my radar screen to run for Congress. I certainly had the concern and the frustration, but things have happened very quickly over the last several months on this, and so the family is very much engaged and supportive. And as you remember our time back in the legislature, Ann was a very active part of our campaign and will be again this time as well. But our kids are, you know, they were very young then.
Yes.
And of course, when we started, we didn't have kids. So I'm glad, I will tell you, I've been glad that I was around here, particularly during the teenage years, to deal with all the things that teenage girls have to deal with. And
help me. I've got two 14-year-olds, okay?
It doesn't get any easier. but it's, I'm grateful. I think things worked out for us the way they're supposed to work out, and I was where I needed to be. And now I feel like there's a place I need to be.
All right. Well, listen, thanks for coming in. You and I will talk a lot more in the weeks ahead leading up to the primary. Appreciate you after a late night watching your Huskies get the victory for coming on in this morning. Always appreciate it, and good seeing you again.
Thank you, Ray.
There you go. Kevin Coughlin with us live in the studio, back in the political arena, as you heard him mention, taking 13 years off, but he sees things a lot differently and is ready to go. 26 minutes after 8 o'clock, WAKR.